Hello, and this presentation is about dilemmas in living and working within gender, sexual and relationship diverse communities. I'm Dominic Davis, I'm a psychotherapist and sexologist, and I'm the founder of the organisation Pink Therapy. I'd like you to put yourself in a creative mind space and think about these three potential scenarios. You're 4 sessions into a course of therapy with Alex, whose main presenting problem is their unmanageable jealousy at their partner Chris's infidelity. You realise in this session, from some unambiguous biographical data about their partner, that you had a brief sexual relationship with Alex's partner Chris. You attend a community event. It's a busy meeting room where you're expected to be for the next few hours. It could be a workshop or a community meeting about an important local matter. You arrive a bit late and the room is crowded and only a few seats remain. One seat is next to a client who sees you enter the room and beckons you over, pointing out the spare seat. In your last session, your client told you that they find you very attractive. You are online dating and are withholding your own face. You get a message from someone whose profile also doesn't have a face pic, but the profile text is an incredibly good match for what you're looking for, and the profile pic is an incredibly hot body. In their first message, they send you a face picture and a series of sexually explicit pics, and you recognize a current client. Now, I'd like us to agree that all therapists should have a right to participate in their community's social activities and to express their sexuality consensually and safely. This benefits not only themselves but also their clients or patients, in that they will be less likely to exploit their clients for their own emotional needs. It's also worth stating unequivocally that sexual contact and seductive behaviours between therapist and client are always wrong, and that therapists have an ethical and professional duty to ensure their behaviour does not mislead a client into thinking otherwise, or contaminate the therapeutic frame with irrelevant and extraneous material about the therapist's life. But the use of self-disclosure has now been recognised by most schools of therapy as not only being unavoidable, but also appropriate, beneficial, and effective. In my nearly 40 years in the field, I've seen the debate about whether to come out to clients move from "thou shalt not" to discussions about the benefits to the client, to the therapeutic relationship, and for the therapist's personal well-being and ability to better serve the client by being open about their sexuality. Some fairly recent British research demonstrates this well, and I commend the papers of Jeffrey and Tweed and Harris et al. To you. And I wish to explore here one crucial area of our personal and professional lives, and one in which there is virtually no professional guidance or research literature. The sex and dating lives of therapists is absent from the literature. Yet, therapists of all genders and sexualities may find themselves single and looking to date, perhaps after a significant relationship ends. And there is an incredible lacunae in the literature about how to go about this. Nor is there much written about how to manage our professional boundaries when entering sexualized spaces, whether it's the dance floor, the back room, the dungeon, or apps, dating apps like Grindr and Tinder. Bettinger reminds us that our rules governing ethical behaviour have largely been created by heterosexual men to discourage other heterosexual men from abusing their positions of power and assaulting their female clients. The same standards have been extended to all other sexual and gender configurations, whether they are appropriate for those contexts or not. And this has been critiqued by the Feminist Therapy Institute, amongst others. People in marginalised communities, especially those falling within gender, sexual and relationship diverse communities are often alienated from their families of origin, and they may feel excluded from mainstream cis and heteronormative hegemonic ideals. They may have more than one significant emotional relationship and practice consensual non-monogamy. They may be raising children in a same-sex headed household. They may have formed families of choice, built to support their sexual or relational values. Their lives might look quite different to the lives of their heterosexual married colleagues and supervisors. Furthermore, minority therapists often feel a passionate desire to work with and support their communities, and research shows that people living in those minority communities often prefer to seek support from professionals who are those members. Thus, it's highly likely we'll be sharing some of the social spaces and dating apps in trying to meet our own sexual, social and romantic needs with our clients. Research in this area is seldom undertaken, but I took an online survey back in 2015 of gay and bisexual male therapists and their use of sex apps. In a sample of 195 therapists, 85% of them used Grindr. Now, while some professional associations have ethical guidelines around online social networking regarding the accepting of friend requests from clients and considerations of what you should disclose and privacy settings, etc., none yet have issued guidance on the use of managing one's participation in the real-life world with regard to public sex environments, dungeons and play parties, and using online dating apps like Tinder and Grindr. In some ways, this is perhaps appropriate, as our private lives are just that, private. But supervisors and training organisations could be having a helpful role in assisting colleagues and consider the implications of a client finding their therapist in an online dating app or a public sex environment. I wonder how many of you have had the conversation with clients about out-of-session contact. And has that also included running into each other in the gym changing rooms or at the swimming pool? How many of you are either single or practicing some form of non-monogamy? If you are using dating apps, do you put your face pic alongside details of the things you're looking for and are into? Or do you not use a face picture, but have a more explicit description of the type of person you're looking for and choose to share your picture when people message you? That way you can control, to some extent, who sees it. However, some apps insist on a face pic as a condition of use. In my research, 55% of my sample displayed a face pic on Grindr, and 45% chose to remain anonymous. How do you feel about the possibility of clients seeing your profile? How do you feel about the possibility of colleagues seeing your profile? Do you feel differently about each of these scenarios? I'm not going to go into the more risque environments here in what I'm assuming is a more mixed environment, but when I attended a conference for kinky therapists in Chicago earlier this year, we had a clinicians meeting of around 40 psychologists and sex therapists. How to manage personal and professional boundaries within the kink community, particularly with regard to entering dungeon play spaces, was the topic which occupied us for an entire 2 hours. Occasions like that are incredibly rare, where people can get together and have frank and open conversations and share experiences. Most of those attending didn't feel they could discuss their kink lifestyle with their supervisors or managers, and few knew any other kink-identified colleagues who could mentor them. Most people were living in fear of running into a client in a kink club, or they had dropped out of their local communities where many of their friends were, and which had been a significant source of personal support for them prior to training. Some people decided to play hundreds of miles away from where they lived, which cut down on their opportunities to participate in their communities significantly. And this seems predicated on the false assumption that their clients didn't also travel to different cities to find excitement and connection. However, I believe there are ways of working with these complex and challenging boundary issues. Having a model for resolving the ethical dilemmas posed by dual or multiple relationships is important. And I recommend Gottlieb, or the chapter that I wrote with Ghislaine Gabriel, or Barrett's work, as it will help you anticipate the likelihood of meeting your clients. I'd invite you to brainstorm some of the likely contexts or your worst case scenarios of where you might come across a client, and consider in advance how you might handle them. These precise situations might not happen, but by calmly thinking through some of the possible scenarios and applying ethical problem-solving techniques, this can help you manage these scenarios when they occur. I found this particularly helpful when, some years after co-authoring a chapter on dual relationships, which I've cited above with Lynn Gabriel, in it I presented a hypothetical scenario of meeting a client in a gay sauna. And when I actually met a client in the steam room of my local baths, it came in very handy. I recommend you write a personal boundaries statement for your clients, which explains how you will manage meeting clients in the various contexts in which your paths might overlap. Such a document will help guide both of you on how you will seek to manage any outside contact and protect their confidentiality and that of the therapeutic relationship. I'd also recommend that you have a supervisor or practice consultant, or that you find a peer supervision group where you can discuss your erotic countertransferences and erotic responses and reflect on your disclosures and your boundary issues in a total openness. Here are some useful questions to discuss with clients in the assessment and contracting stage of deciding whether you can work together. How often have we met before and in what context? How does this affect our reactions to each other? How much do our friendship circles overlap, and to what degree of closeness are there, or separation? Are there any particular conflicts of interest? How would you feel if we both attended the same social event, party, or activity? You can see that these could be very useful to you. Anyway, time's getting on, and I appreciate the opportunity of being able to share some of my thinking with you here today, as it's something I've been researching, writing, and teaching about for many years. We also have a module on living and working with our communities on our training programs if you want to know more. Thank you very much for your attention.